Hello, and welcome to the Christchurch Fox Chapel podcast.
On the first part of the journey, I was looking at all the life. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rain.
Well, it's the fastest growing conservative, evangelical, charismatic,
equestrian
podcast in the entire Fox Chapel area.
The ground was dry, but the air was full of sound. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out.
Horses, Ben.
horses and donkeys.
Oh, don't forget the donkeys.
Thousands of donkeys, like 700 horses,
Mules.
a massive migration of around 50,000 people
Camels.
going across 1,000 miles of desert.
Pack animals.
What are we talking about?
Quadrupeds.
More than quadrupeds. This is, we're in Ezra chapter 2.
Yes.
And this is I think we've both been struggling with how do we go into this massive amount of information? Because this is really a section of scripture that's a little different than kind of where we've covered before. So we've talked about Moses and the Exodus from Egypt, right? We've talked about David and the period of the judges before David and like Israel coming up in the land. We've talked a lot about these prophets like Amos and Joel who were saying there's going to be an exile when the people were disobedient.
Yeah.
And then I think we've often sort of jumped across the whole exile thing and gotten right into Jesus.
Right.
But there's a period of history, about a 100-year span that happens around 540 to 440-ish BC. So roughly 550 years before Jesus' birth.
Right.
In which God really miraculously works in sovereign rule over the nations to bring his people home.
Yeah, I guess you might say it's the last chapter of the Old Testament. Because there's this intertestamental period, 400-year period, roughly, between the end of the Old Testament, the beginning of the New, where we just don't know really much about what's going on biblically.
Yeah.
So we have other books. So this is the final scene of the Old Testament, or the beginning of the final scene. So the people of God, they've been taken away into Babylonian exile. Babylon itself, the superpower that took them, has been overthrown by Persia, a new emerging superpower. Persia, it sends the people home. The people of Judah, this is, the people of the southern kingdom.
Yeah.
They're sent home in waves. They don't just all go at once.
And the ruler of Persia that's Cyrus. You hear mentioned in the Bible sometimes, right? Yeah. Okay.
So King Cyrus, he sends them home. This was, we know, his regular practice. This was a way of controlling vassal states, and it was just what they did. But Ezra wants us to see in chapter 1 that God's hand is on this, because prophetically, before the exile and in the early waves of the exile, there were these prophetic books written that said, this is going to happen. You've abandoned God. As a result of your abandonment of God, you are taking yourself away from the covenant blessing of the covenant land. You will experience the covenant curse of exile and slavery overseas, or abroad, not overseas, over desert. And but it's a definitive period of time. You will be in exile for a definitive period of time. It's a very symbolic period, 70 years. At the end of that, you start to come home.
Yeah.
And we're picking up the story in Ezra chapter 2 with the people of God actually returning home. And it is a long, elaborate, fairly dull-sounding list of who was the son of who came back, how many people there were in that particular clan or family or whatever, and even down to what they used to get around, how many donkeys they had, and how many horses and camels and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But
it's really long with a lot of weird names. And we're actually, I think Courtney Myram is going to be reading it on Sunday morning.
It is probably the most terrible reading we've ever read in church.
I think she was kind of honored that we asked her to do it because she's a good reader and she's going to move through it. But like, just to give a little bit of an example of what we're talking about, let me just read the first like 5 verses.
Okay.
Now these were the people of the province, this is Ezra chapter 2, of the province who came up out of the captivity of those exiles whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried captive to Babylonia. So remember, 586, carried the people captive over to Babylon, and then they are returning now, 538-ish. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to his own town. They came with Zerubbabel, Jeshua, Nehemiah, Sariah, Realiah, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mispar, Bigvai, Rehum, and Baana.
Not banana.
Not banana, not to be confused with banana. The number of the men of the people of Israel. I'm only going to read like a verse of this.
Okay.
The sons of Parash, 2172. The sons of Shephatiah, 372. The sons of Ara, 775. And it keeps on going like that with these like, here's how many of each family, each household, and then how many, and then it goes into place names.
Yeah.
Like the men from Bethlehem and
Bethel and Ai and Magbish.
And all these are all like towns around Jerusalem. So like it's a really long list.
Name after name, number after number.
And so it's a fair question. Like, well, why do we have a list here? Like, why, of all the ways that you could deal with this, like, what's the importance of this? Is this just filler in the Old Testament?
Well,
no.
It's telling us that real things happen to real people.
Yeah.
So there's detail here that could be cross-referenced. I imagine it's a kind of roll call that at the time in the early readings of this, people would recognize these names.
Yeah.
It's my granddad. So, you'd want to be written in it.
Yeah.
My granddad is written up from the Second World War in a book called Blue Flash.
Oh, really?
And it says Lieutenant Jack Shuttleworth was driving his tank in this field at this time, and such a thing happened. And that's it. But we bought a whole copy of the book for that.
Yeah.
And to find that as a young man interested in history was really exciting. So even though the book itself is monumentally dull. So
it doesn't matter though.
Records are significant. Records are important. It's also gives you a sense of scale. The scale is enormous, isn't it? You were talking just before we started recording about the end of this passage. So you've got so-and-so's son and so-and-so from this place and that place, and he had so many donkeys and all the rest of it. And then we get to verse 64, which is a kind of summary bit of math.
Yeah. 42,360 people plus like around 7,500 servants and singers, all on about 8,000 pack animals, traveling about 1,000 miles
through rough terrain
and carrying modern equivalent. We can only guesstimate, but roughly $35 million in gold, $2.3 million in silver, and about 500 grand in garments, but they're religious garments. They're the priest's garments, so they're priceless, right? Like,
right. And when you think about if you go on a modern hiking trip or something, you go backpacking, the amount of weight saving you do. My friend Stu would pull bristles out of his toothbrush to save weight.
Yeah, we used to do that. Actually, I still kind of do that when I go backpacking. Do you have a toothbrush that I've cut the handle off of it?
Yeah.
And so it's just a little bristle.
Because every little ounce becomes a pound, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, so it comes together.
So, but they don't have, Pertex shells and, lofting down sleeping bags and this kind of stuff.
They have donkeys.
So heavy packs, heavy woven baskets and things made of leather and skin. And so a lot of weight, a lot of material, a lot of gold requires a lot of donkeys. And your sermon is called A Lot of Donkeys because part of me hoped that you would just simply speak about the load capacity of the ancient Near Eastern donkey for maybe half an hour and then stop. But
yeah.
And I know that you've researched it as well.
Well, we both have, and what your estimate I think is the most accurate.
Well, right? That's kind of so. A medium donkey.
A medium donkey
would, according to Grok AI, be able to carry 120 pounds across that terrain in that climate without dying en route. Because obviously you could put more weight on the thing, but then it would just, squish and its legs would go out like Tom and Jerry.
Yeah, and you probably have to go from oasis to oasis, right? To get water to support the whole thing. So it's a massive logistical operation here of what's going on.
I mean, to put, in modern context, moving 42,000 people, plus others, servants, so 50,000 people. Moving 50,000 people through any kind of context is difficult. Think of a football game.
Yeah.
And, you're English Premier League, you're in the kind of bottom half of the, Crystal Palace wouldn't quite get that many. Liverpool would get a bit more.
Yeah.
You're in a big football match.
Yes.
That's a lot. I was thinking about the escape from Kabul in the 1850s when the British went to the Khyber Pass, and Lady Sale in her journal reckons there were about 10,000. So this is 5 times bigger than that huge operation, which was a total disaster.
Well, this wasn't a total disaster.
No, the Khyber Pass.
Yeah.
So to move 50,000 people, and presumably there's this isn't 50,000 crack troops. This is 50,000 singers,
young, old, women, children. And everybody. It's a civilian migration. Yeah. And they're making their way. And it's I think it's as interesting that we don't know exactly who wrote Ezra and Nehemiah. I mean, clearly Ezra, the priest, is involved here in putting some of this stuff together. Yeah. Conservative Orthodox scholars have identified it's probably either Ezra or Nehemiah or the chronicler, whoever wrote Chronicles. But it's very rooted in the documents. It's very, clearly whoever's made this text had documents in front of them,
right?
And they took pains to divide all of the people by family and town. And then there's this one thing I think that's really interesting at the end that I think actually kind of gets us toward the meaning of the passage.
Okay.
And that's in verse 59. He says, the following were those who came up from Tel Melah, Tel Harsha, Cherub, Adon, and Immer. Those are all Babylonian names. Whenever it starts with Tel, it's usually I think it's a word for an oasis.
A hill?
Or a hill, that's it.
I think sometimes those cities that were demolished by invaders and things, when the inhabitants rebuilt the city, there would be rubble on the ground, and they would rebuild over the rubble. And so over time, if you had a city that was under siege and numbers of times, been sacked numbers of times, it basically gets higher.
So it becomes a mound.
It becomes a mound, yeah. And so archaeologists can dig back through a tell and say different strata of different ages and things.
Fascinating.
So yeah, these would be established cities that had probably been disestablished and reestablished again.
Okay, so these are people from these places in Babylon, and it says, though they could not prove their fathers' houses or their descent, whether they belonged to Israel, the sons of Deliah, the sons of Tobiah, and the sons of Nekoda, 652. And there's a group that can't prove that they're Levites, Levite priests. But I think it's very interesting that everybody is tracing their genealogy.
Yes.
It's extremely important. And
why is that?
Because here's what I think. When you're in the land, you're God's people, right? You have the land. They had the land. Yeah. They're like, we're God's people. Look, we have the land. We have the temple. This is this constitutes our identity. All of that. And God said through the prophets, no, that doesn't make you my people. You've proven not to be my people, but they've been exiled to Babylon, and they are very concerned to make sure that it's clear that they are still of Israel. Yeah. And this is because it's in the very structure of God's redemptive work that it would be that God was going to rescue the world through a particular lineage. Yes. A particular line of people. Right. Going all the way back to Genesis 3:15, right? You have God says to the woman or the serpent, I'll put enmity. Yeah, to the woman, I'll put enmity between you and the serpent, between her offspring and your offspring. He shall bruise your head, says to the serpent.
Crush your head, and he shall.
Yeah, he shall crush your head, and you shall bruise his heel.
Yeah.
So the seed of the woman, of Eve, becomes extremely important throughout Genesis.
Now, this promise is restated or amplified or refined or whatever you might want to say to for example, Abraham.
Yeah.
Your offspring.
Your offspring I'll make like the sand of the sea. And then, Abraham has to ultimately be willing to give that up in Genesis 22 with the sacrifice of Isaac. But God preserves Isaac and brings about this line that then goes into Egypt.
Right.
And then it's brought into question again, but God delivers them out of Egypt, brings them into the promised land, and they start to flourish.
Right.
And then there's a king over it all, who they appoint, or God appoints David.
Right.
And he makes a promise to David.
Yes. That you shall. Well, it says, "You want to build me a house, I shall build you a house."
Yeah.
And then you shall have a king on my a king on my throne forever.
Yeah.
Right.
Forever. No matter what. Even if you and your lineage fail.
Right.
Like my faithfulness is going to remain to your line.
Now, in the book of Isaiah, which we quoted last weekend, Isaiah is prophesying this disaster, this exile, which starts to look, with the people being banished from the promised land, as though the covenant has somehow collapsed and that God has failed. So we no longer have that promise. We've been holding on to the Eve promise, or the Satan promise, actually, the Abraham promise and the David promise for all this time. And what's happened is the inviolable promised land has been invaded. The people have been carried off. It looks as though everything has failed. But Isaiah says, no, there shall come forth, this is chapter 11, there shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse. And this is a classic Advent reading that we've probably heard many times. Jesse is the father of David. And imagine a little tree that's been chopped right down to the stump, but a tiny green kind of branch, just a faint little thing shoots up.
Yeah.
A little bit of growth again from the roots. And that little tiny hope is the promise. It's the offspring hope. It's Jesus. I think it's making this clear point, God's sovereign will to rescue through the line of David. Yes.
And through the seed of the woman, which is the seed of Abraham, is unstopped by any powerful ruler.
Not Nebuchadnezzar and not Cyrus.
Yeah. No one. And so it's these people, they understood the promise. They've lost the land. The temple is in ruins. But the only other promise that they have at this point is the promise of offspring. Yeah. And so this is why at the end of Ezra, there's going to be this section where they're very concerned because some of the people have been intermarrying with people in the land. And
I was going to ask you about this.
Yeah.
Because, you were talking about this kind of purity of lineage point.
Yeah.
And that struck me as relevant to this. We know, for example, and you mentioned it on the podcast last week, that Israel had split in two. Israel in the north, Judah in the south. And that one of the things taking place in the northern kingdom, as it then was this intermarrying.
Yeah.
That they'd assimilated with Assyria, for example, but not just Assyria. They'd bred with Moab and Philistia and these other places. And when the men took wives from foreign lands, they often ended up taking on the religious practices of those foreign lands as well. And so they syncretized, they mashed together God worship, Yahweh worship with, for example, Chemosh or Molech or Baal or whomever. And in this syncretic mess, they had defiled themselves and said, well, we're going to worship God and your God. And so now their children had grown up with, God and Baal. And the Baal stuff seems a bit more fun because there's a lot more sex. So you always end up going to the easier kind of thing. And then their kids had grown up like, well, Granddad used to quite like Yahweh. What was Yahweh like? Well, he was angry and you couldn't have any sex. And like, what's Baal like? Well, a lot of drinking, and so they had very quickly descended into, from a hybrid to something that was really just very wicked. And
in the matter of a few generations, all knowledge of God is lost.
Right.
I think that's a really good point. That like in the people's heart, there's something that has to be preserved here. There's a purity, and the way that, at least at this moment of redemptive history, that was preserved was through, like, you don't marry outside of the fold. Right. So you have these like two things really, like the purity of the religious purity of the people, and also maintaining the line, because these promises had been given specifically through a line. It doesn't fit with our modern sensibilities. Like this seems really ethnocentrist.
Well, we could possibly just pause the story a minute and say, zoom out. Okay, we are now members of the new covenant. We're Christians. Yeah. And we understand the promises in the book of Romans that we can come to another time, that actually where Israel has been unfaithful and kind of wandered off, Christians through Christ are grafted in to this promise.
Yes.
I mean, again, it's more kind of root, stump, branch language, very reminiscent of this. And that almost like a wild olive branch, Paul says in Romans, we as Christians through faith get grafted into this old olive tree of Israel. So the Abrahamic promise to take over the whole world through God's chosen people actually is something that comes through faith, and it's available to all of us. So this isn't a kind of Hutus versus Tutsis kind of genocide and kind of ethnic purity or kind of Aryan race Hitler stuff.
In fact, actually, once we get to the new, I mean, I guess we're jumping right forward, but like once we get to the New Testament, through the one man, there basically Jesus is both the true king and the true Israel
and the true Adam.
And so all the promises of God are fulfilled in this one person. And it is like there's this massive sort of explosion of outreach to the whole world. To all people. So this is why Paul says, there's no Jew nor Greek.
Right. And why Jesus says, go out into all the nations.
Yeah. Yeah. He says, the promise becomes available to all on account of this. And so this is why as Christians, there's literally no people group that is like
outside of our interest.
I mean, you could say that like all of the races of the world and all the peoples and tribes of the world coming together as one family is the biblical
goal, the telos, the point.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so that's just something we have to say, but we're at a special point in the history of the Old Testament. And okay, we've got one eye on the New Testament, and in each of these sermons, hopefully we tie it into Christ the cross and what it means for us today. Yeah. But we still need to understand the what should we say, the cultic setting of temple worship in the ancient Near East at this time. We've got to understand that. Yeah. And the purity point is relevant to the lineage thing. It's relevant to the just practice. Look what happened to Israel when they did this thing. And look what happened to Judah when finally they ended up doing the same thing. Yeah. But there seems to be this sort of hyper group, if you like. You brushed on them a few moments ago. The Levitical priests.
The Levitical priests.
It seems to be even more significant that they are able to be credentialized.
Yeah, because God had instructed that only the Levites and only those of the Levites of a specific lineage could be the priests, and this is a mediatory role in the under the Old Covenant.
Tell us more about a mediatory role, or mediatory.
Mediatory. A go-between, a middleman. A mediator represents God to the people and represents the people before God. So they're kind of you could call it like maybe the transaction between the people and God. Yeah, the broker. has to be, you need a priest for that.
Right.
Side note, that's why we don't have priests
In the New Testament.
in the New Testament, because we have one priest.
And that's Christ Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really helpful. So at the time under the Old Covenant,
Yes.
temple worship, this was the place you went to get right with God. Sacrifices could be made that would atone
Yes.
for your sin, that could purify or consecrate things, that could be used in worship or thanks, wave offerings, thanks offerings. There were all sorts of 5 types of sacrifices that were offered in the temple for your relationship with God, to establish or maintain it.
Yes.
Let's put it that way. But the sacrifices had to be presented to this holy God in a holy way. And he had ring-fenced the temple, the presence of God, in all sorts of significant cultic ways, with walls and curtains and barriers, with certain people, purification rites, and times of the year when things were to be done in a very particular way. And so in sending back the Levitical priesthood and being meticulous about who is and who isn't.
Yeah, because, and this is important, that the genealogy, they have to be able to prove that they are descended from Levitical priests.
So
because if you have someone offering sacrifices in the temple and it turns out, oh, my genealogy is wrong, you've disobeyed the commandment of God regarding how he's to be worshipped. And it's almost like you're working with a nuclear reactor.
Yes.
And you have someone in there and they're like, oh, I just decided not to wear my suit.
Now, the awesome thing about being a Christian, we're jumping back into because people say this to us, I mean, not so much anymore, but when I started in ordained life, if something was off, like a garment, people would have this fear that their Christian stuff wasn't going to work right.
Yeah.
In my previous church, we started a church service that didn't have robes. And then we started another one that didn't have robes.
Yeah.
And then another one that didn't have robes. And then another one and another one and another one. And so we had 7 services, 6 without robes, because they all grew. And the robe people were very disturbed about this. It won't work. And helpfully, the articles of religion, which are a kind of foundational document of Anglican doctrine, published at the back of the prayer book, they're really clear. And they say that the deficiencies of the minister don't render the sacrament invalid. So that is to say, right, let's say I'm wearing the wrong clothes.
Yep.
Or worse, let's say I am a chronically wicked sinner in the midst of actually practicing chronically wicked sin.
God still works.
Right.
And it's because of his sovereign will and work.
But they don't have that because...
No.
So the fact is that when we do the Lord's Supper, it's called the Lord's Supper for a reason. That's because it's the Lord's Supper. So the validity of the sacrament of Holy Communion or Lord's Supper is validated by Christ himself, our supreme great high priest.
So they are trying to approach God through the intercession of the mediation of a temple sacrifice here on earth. Right. And it has to be as close to perfect. It has to be perfect. We approach God through the mediation of a temple sacrifice in heaven.
Right.
That is perfect.
The Christ is our great mediator and advocate.
Because Jesus is the priest who is offering it, being himself.
Right.
Continually. So we don't have, that's why we don't have a temple, because we actually have a temple in heaven.
Right. And this would be why it's always important when we preach a book of the Old Testament like this, that we have almost 2 translations to do in our heads, right? When we preach the New Testament, we're often trying to couch it in modern terms. But when we do this, we're almost trying to couch it in New Testament terms and in modern terms. So the Levitical priesthood and their purity matters because they can't reboot the faith without them. Would that be about right?
Yeah, it doesn't, it has to be perfect. It has to, and they're going back here. Remember, the temple is just, what did you say in your sermon? Just a chalky charcoal outline that's been burned to the ground.
Yeah, you've seen probably fire ruins or something.
Yeah,
and it's just a brown or blackened square on the ground where it all used to be.
And the whole place. One of the questions I was wondering, and I want to try to do some work into this, is like, the proportion of people who who went into exile. I wonder how many went into exile compared to how many are coming back. I know that we know that there are roughly 1/10 of this crowd are priests,
Right.
which is interesting. Like a tithe are priests.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. I don't know if that's coincidence or
Well, I mean,
what
that's,
exactly.
maybe that's good because when the 12 tribes were living, one of the tribes was Levi, so a 12th was priests.
Yeah.
Now we've just got these 3 tribes coming back: Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. So it's interesting that there's still this kind of overrepresentation of non-priests.
Yeah.
We do know that when the Babylonian exile began, it was the practice of Babylon to take away people that seemed useful. So, vine dressers and certain farmers would be taken, artisans that could produce something beautiful, gold workers or whatever, they could be taken. The intellectuals, the priests, the people of learning and letters, they would be taken because they could be involved in jurisprudence, they could be involved in all sorts of, seeking gods and things, at least as they saw it. But they were a bit selective. They wouldn't just take a scoop of all the morons.
Yeah. You have some elites, I think.
Yeah.
And there's lots of wealth involved in this. And I think, though, the most important name on this list is at the beginning.
Donkey
is Zerubbabel.
Yeah.
Which means something like born in Babylon.
Oh, really? Oh, Babel.
Zerubbabel.
Wow.
Or it could mean son of Babylon, but he is the governor. So, in other words, Persia has come in, and we know that there's a multi-layered government, right? You have some people who are, I think he had 3 people below him who were kind of heads of things. Wasn't Daniel one of those guys? He was very high up.
For sure, yeah.
And then below that you have satraps, which were kind of like provincial governors. And then there are governors of the region. And Zerubbabel has been appointed
The borough manager.
Yeah, by the Persians.
Right.
And he's leading this group of 50,000 odd people in going back here. He's a descendant of David. He's of the tribe of Judah.
Right.
And the thing that is so important about Zerubbabel is not how he functions in this story, although he is the leader here, but rather who his great many times over grandson is, which is Jesus.
Right. He's the link. He's
both on Mary's side and on Joseph's side, I believe.
That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
So here you have the line of David being brought back. And through this movement, God is bringing out the true remnant.
And he's the first person mentioned on this long list.
Yeah.
They came with Zerubbabel. He's the first on the list.
So something of Jesus is
coming back.
Is coming back here.
Which tells us that when God exiled them, he left with them. Which is interesting. He didn't banish them from himself. He banished them from the land and went with them.
Yeah.
And we see this with the traducing of the vessels. These are God's vessels that are profaned. The abominations that are done with those vessels are done to God or against God.
Yes.
So God is actually paying the cost or the price of exile. It's not like he's angry, right, I'm sending you all away. It hurts him. Because his worship is gone, temple's gone, it's his temple. His artifacts have been defiled. And now as it turns out that the root of Jesse was sent off as well.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff.
And yet he's being brought back. And this is because through God's sovereign work over a man who was kind of a wicked king, Cyrus. He was at least a pagan king with no real who's clearly manipulating circumstances to consolidate power.
Now, another line I think is really important to understand would be the line of Kiriath Arim, which comes through Caripiah, and Beeroth as well, Ben.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking them.
What is it about them?
Well, everyone should know. That's self-explanatory, right? Kiriath Berim.
I've got no idea.
Oh, you're just... What about Zatu? I really can't wait for Courtney to have to read this passage on Sunday.
Zatu was the bird in The Lion King, right?
No, that's Zazu. Zazu, I think. Well, it's like Mithridath. Sounds like...
Mithrandir,
Gandalf. This is... I think, although in your Bible reading plan, this is not going to be a fun one to get through, this is just... I think it testifies to a few things. One, the Bible is an accurate historical document. This really happened. And this is a serious list.
it's accurate. It's full.
Yeah.
It gives a sense of scale.
Yeah.
These are all significant things. It gives a sense of God's faithfulness, but it also gives a sense of smallness, because this promise was just a tiny shoot from the stump. And the list actually begins with the very shoot.
And maybe Jesus reflecting in his own teaching, reflect some on this idea, the shoot of Jesse, when he talked about things like the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed,
right,
which is like the smallest, tiniest little thing, but then grows into this great tree that the birds of the air can rest on. I mean, God's plan is to use the weak things of the world to shame the strong. And I think you see that pattern throughout the history of his people, and he's sovereignly worked to bring the Messiah. And even now, I think we can take encouragement that even in the mixture of good, bad, and ugly happening in our own world today, with God is doing work and often in the things that seem insignificant. But he's alive, and he's on the move, and he will bring about his promises. They're more sure than anything else.
That's wonderful. Really helpful, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you much. This is catching my vibe today. This is...
Yeah. Well, this has been a podcast of Christ Church Fox Chapel, where, of course, it's Donkey Week.
Donkey. No, sorry, that's a goat.
Oh, they probably had goats. Doesn't say anything about them, but they probably had goats.
I can't imagine.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for stopping by.
Stay classy.
But mostly,
Stay classy.
yeah.